Hey there, what's up? Today I want to talk about one of the biggest mistakes and one of the most costly mistakes in the professional world, and that is missing alignment. You know, when two members of any organization come together and they kind of commit on something, and then after a while trying to actually reach that goal, they figure out they were going in different directions. So all the time that has spent until the first and the second meeting is already lost, it's waste. Basically, you paid for something without any result. They need to come together and figure out what exactly went on and kind of what is the misunderstanding there, and that can actually lead to demotivation of at least one or maybe both members of the organization, and that is very costly because then they are not as motivated anymore to actually reach that goal, and that costs you. So in order to understand that better, we need to talk about a couple of things. One of them is the pros and cons of buzzwords. It's really important, right? We use them to, we will come to that in a bit. And really important as well is the human ego, right? What do I understand? How do I act when I understand something or do not understand something? These kind of things. And lastly, I would like to provide a solution to that. I would like to provide how you can solve this problem, how you can actually avoid this mistake or avoid the cost of this mistake better. So let's get to it. I recently got into a conversation with a change agent in an organization, and she was telling me about the difficulties right now that occurred between the development teams and the DevOps department in her organization. And when I heard this, DevOps department, I immediately had to smile. Because, the term DevOps department, do you mean a department of people who have difficulties hearing? Or do you mean a department that actually involves operations into the development? Like the term DevOps. You know the difference? DevOps, DevOps. It's quite a significant difference there. So be really, really careful how you want to use that. And we talked about that, and I kind of tried to explain what exactly DevOps mean, which obviously was not understood the same way in that organization, as at least I understand that, and I guess most people do. DevOps is a set of practices with the intention to actually reduce the time between committing a change to a system and placing that change into normal operations, like releasing. And she and her organization clearly did not understand that. They thought that DevOps was basically just a new and fancy term for system administration. It's fair enough, right? If you operate like that, why not? But you should be careful with what buzzwords you use. So let's talk about buzzwords. Why do we have them? What's the pros and the cons of them? Basically, buzzwords are supposed to save time. Instead of explaining all the time the entire story of something, you just use this one term and everyone understands the same thing, at least in an ideal world. But what actually happens is we live in a world where we always need to come up with something new, where it's something fancy. And that leads to the fact that quite often, like old system, old mechanics, something that is already known just gets a new word, a new buzzword, and is sold as new. Yeah, it's not the best way to do that, and quite often it's just there to sell some new books or sell some new courses or whatever. But there are as well some positive sides to that. For example, a term is defined, and after a while you figure out within the community or within your clients or wherever that this term is kind of not the best term. It is misunderstood more often than not, or the explanation of that term just is way too large. It misleads basically. So you try to actually come up with a better term for that to ease that out. And that recently happened to Scrum, and the Scrum Master specifically, the term Scrum Master. J.J. Sutherland wrote in his latest book that after he reviewed that what a Scrum Master actually is, he went to his father, Jeff Sutherland, and asked him and told him basically like, hey, you might want to consider renaming Scrum Master to Agile Coach. That works better, people better understand that, and it kind of is, it is closer to what exactly it is, because the Scrum Master doesn't master Scrum. He's more coaching, right? But Jeff then said that this is kind of not a good idea because this term is so used in the community already, and he doesn't want to make that change. It would just not be as easy or as smooth and as beneficial, therefore, as it seems in first place. And I don't want to blame the inventor of new buzzwords for old things all too much, because, We all live in a society where we want to be the first to spot something. So the customers, go to the supermarket, you will see how many new products are out there like every month. If you haven't been in a supermarket for 2 years, you most likely wouldn't even understand what's going on there. There are so many different brands and sorts or types of anything right now or nowadays. And yeah, this is because customers want that. They always want to be the first one to spot something. They want to tell their friends about this new cool thing that they have seen or identified first. It seems like there is some value of being the first to have seen something. And that's fair enough. It's kind of in our nature. We want to be the first. That's good. But there's one gigantic disadvantage with buzzwords, specifically new buzzwords. And that is people are lazy. It might be controversial, I get that, but still, it is true. People are lazy. Most people, when they hear a new term, they don't go and do the research. They don't really try to figure out what exactly is meant by that with all the little aspects of it. No, they hear a little bit of it and then they assume, I know it already. Or they interpret what they would like this buzzword to be. Which is really not a good idea, because then when you talk with these buzzwords and someone else has a different understanding of it, that becomes really problematic. And additionally, when you are in a conversation and you just hear a new buzzword, a lot of people, they have this ego kicking in, where they say, I can't be here the only one who doesn't know what exactly that means. So I just pretend I do know it, and I'm just listening in for just a little bit, and this will tell me enough and more information so that I can use this buzzword furthermore again. I can go back to my environment and can be the first to use it, right? Yeah, well, nobody has time. My point being, if you use a buzzword, please make sure that everyone there understands the same thing under this buzzword, and allow everyone else to speak up in regards to that. Within your organization specifically, it doesn't matter if you use exactly the meaning that maybe the rest of the world uses, but at least within you should have a very, very crystal clear understanding and common understanding about what exactly each buzzword means. Otherwise, it will be very costly, and you kind of want to avoid that, I'm guessing. I mentioned that already in the beginning, but I really want to emphasize on that, how costly it is to be misaligned within your organization. You don't only have the time that is like between a commitment of something or a misalignment and then going in different directions, and you need to figure out that you are in different directions. Then you need to come back to the table, kind of clarify that. All the time in between is lost. It's not just the cost specifically for the employees, the room, electricity and all that. No, there's as well the cost of missing opportunity. Because whatever you're doing, your product, your service or whatnot, is just later on the market. And that is lost opportunity for revenue, and maybe even you lose out on a big chance and your competitor is quicker and you kind of lose out entirely, and it's a total loss. That's one factor. But it's as well the missing or the demotivation, the missing satisfaction, the missing engagement of the people. Whenever you have a misunderstanding, then usually kind of one side is wrong. It's not always pointed out like that, and that's good, but you might just feel like that. And this kind of demotivates you. Or you have the feeling like, oh man, the other guy or the other person is really not that smart. So I really don't want to work with that person anymore, because this can happen again and again in the future. So it kind of harms your environment, it harms your culture. And this is huge loss that you will have for every future development that you're doing right now. So please be very careful. It is so costly. This can actually have effects for months or weeks at least. Well, which is really which is a big disadvantage, and try to avoid that. But how exactly? You could do a glossary, right? Kind of a dictionary type for your organization where every buzzword has their description and it's all written down and really thoroughly documented, and ideally you place it somewhere in a wiki where nobody ever will find it again. Kind of like that. But I would not advertise that. I would not advocate for that. Basically, don't do that. The maintenance work that you have to put into this is gigantic. People will have the tendency to not look it up. So you kind of don't gain much other than you can point fingers and tell them, hey, you had the chance to look it up. It is all on you. And keep in mind what this does with motivation. You could have looked it up so you might not want to do that. But you can take the same amount of effort that it takes to create this glossary to just take it granularly into every conversation, where you quickly align within the organization what exactly the buzzword means. Like when you have a meeting for an hour and you intend to use this one buzzword quite often, like this is maybe the key point of the entire meeting, you might want to clarify this in the very early stage of the meeting. This is what I mean by that. Does everyone have the same understanding, or should we clarify that first before we go on? And if this seems costly, to do this every time you use a buzzword, or nearly every time you use a buzzword, I mean, if I told you that yesterday, I might not have to do that today again. But you know, frequently, every couple of weeks, I should maybe clarify that we all understand the same thing, specifically if it's about something important, like a commitment of something. And how I do that when I'm not, like, you know, the main moderator of a meeting, and something is said, and I'm really not clear if we have the same understanding, or I just want to be very crystal clear that everyone has the same understanding. Although I might assume that everyone has, but I still want to be absolutely certain about that fact. Then I just ask. I ask whoever used the buzzword, hey, what exactly do you mean by XYZ? Or if I want to mildden this a little bit, I might add that, hey, I have heard different interpretations for this, so could you please be very clear about what exactly you mean? Can you phrase this in different words, please? So what you do is you kind of value their opinion as well, because you allow them, you give them the space to actually describe what exactly they want or what they mean. And that's valuing them, that's something positive. Might not feel like that in first place, but there is a subconscious effect about that, and this is really beautiful in the after effect. And you completely stop this BS bingo. This, the person who can use the most buzzwords is the smartest in the room. You know, this kind of game, I'm sure you have played that in your past. So stop that entirely by asking all the time, please explain that. And whenever they use a new term, they will kind of get into this mode like, oh, I anyway have to explain it, so I can just stop this right away. And we don't have this cockfight going on. Who is the smartest? That's a good culture. That's a good aspect, or that's a good influence on culture when you kind of stop that entirely. And in opposite effect, you create this alignment culture. You create this culture and you will basically provoke others to do the same when they are going in meetings, even without you. That they really go into this rhythm, into this habit of asking, what exactly do you mean? Let's be really clear about that, so that we don't go in different directions and we don't have this huge money drain or cost increase that we don't really need to have. Essentially improves the collaboration, which is something you should be looking after, right? I guess. And this concludes this week's video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. If you have already done that, thank you very much, appreciate it, it goes a long way. If you'd like to see more of those videos, I come up with a new one every Monday. Please consider subscribing to this channel and crush the bell icon so that you will get a notification, unless you have disabled them, from YouTube if a new video comes out. I guess there's nothing more to say. Guys, enjoy the time, have an awesome... Something crushed. Have an awesome time. So this concludes this week's video. Try that fast, that's really funny. This concludes this week's video. This concludes this week's video. And this concludes this week's And this concludes this week's video.
She does. Well, isn't that nice? Well, we'd like to go sometime too, wouldn't we?